and preparedness in the area of security and migration in the European Commission. So this is my first CERIS event. I must say it's a very unusual setting for a Commission event, but I'm told that this has historical reasons, and very interested to hear that this is a community that has really grown over the years to a very impressive size, and that is bringing together so many people from different areas, from policymakers, practitioners, national authorities, ministries, researchers, and industry representatives across Europe. This is exactly what we need in order to do what we want to do, and that is bring innovation forward and bring innovation to the market. So I'm very happy to see the strong interest. We were a bit unlucky because we have a national strike today, but then this happens relatively often lately. So it's not a unique event. But therefore, we have also a couple of people who are online and who follow online. We are very innovative. So, of course, this community could not be kind of impaired by a simple strike. Now, this is today about wildfires. I must say I was a bit surprised when I saw this. I didn't know that we in DG Home also deal with wildfires, but when I read what colleagues had prepared for me, I understood indeed how this is important for us. I mean, we see that this is becoming more frequent. We have climate change, we have prolonged droughts, we have environmental pressures, and this puts increasingly our nature at risk. And the fire seasons are getting more frequent and longer. We also know that many fires are caused by human activity, can be accidental, can be deliberate, and this is, of course, where we come in from the security perspective, because at that point it's not only an environmental challenge, it is also a security concern, both when we're looking at kind of the origin, the perpetrator, but also, of course, of the people that are concerned. The effects are pretty known. I mean, everyone sees the pictures on television, and we know how devastating the consequences for communities, infrastructure, and natural ecosystems can be. And therefore, this is not only about being prepared and preventing, but we also need a stronger security perspective, and we also need to bring in law enforcement authorities in this whole discussion. For these reasons, we have made this one of our priorities in the European Union. And it's one of the areas where innovation is becoming essential. We have already invested over the last years quite some funds through the EU-funded security research program in that area. And we have supported through these investments quite a few promising ideas, developing new innovative tools and technologies. Just as an example, we have tools to improve early warning systems, we have advanced monitoring detection tools, we have data analytics, and we have decision support systems. And all this can help authorities to better anticipate risks and to respond more effectively to wildfire threats. Europe has strong research capabilities, we are proud of that. And we have a dynamic innovation ecosystem, but we have for some time faced an important challenge, and that is to bring our innovation, to bring the results of our research to the market. Innovation is necessary and great, but it's not enough. We need to ensure the uptake, also knowing that innovators are often small, medium-sized enterprises who don't have the networks, who don't have the means to market their products, and this is where we need to become stronger to help them to bridge that gap. So the gap between research results and operation deployment. That means we need a stronger cooperation between end users, researchers, industry, policymakers, national authorities. We need to bring them all together to have a seamless development from innovation to the end user, not only in the interest of the innovators, but of course in our interest, because only if we take up the best new ideas, we will make progress on what we want to achieve. So this is why CERIS is so important. And I'm very happy, as I said, now to take this over and to follow what you are doing. I must say this is a completely new area for me, and I always like to learn new things, and this is really very, very interesting. The workshop today will allow you to exchange your knowledge, to identify common needs, to strengthen your cooperation. We will hear about several EU-funded projects that are developing innovative solutions to support wildfire preparedness and prevention. And we see that these projects, in our view, demonstrate a strong potential of European research and industry to contribute to disaster resilience and security. But as I said, we want to focus today also on the question, how do we bring this actually to the use, in this case by public authorities? We have already one important instrument, and that is innovation procurement. We do have, in particular, pre-commercial procurement, or PCP, and there we have a tool that can help public authorities to work together to develop innovative solutions that respond to the common capability gaps. Through this PCP, the public authorities can engage directly with innovators, so we do not have this situation that you publish a call and then out there people need to respond to the call, but you can have a different kind of contact. You can engage with innovators, with the industry, to develop technologies that respond to the real operational needs. We hope that this approach will help reducing the gap between research and real-world deployment, and that this will ensure that innovation is driven by the needs of the practitioners. Later today, you will have interactive workshop sessions, and I hope all of you will participate actively in it. And this will give you the opportunity to discuss concrete needs and priorities for the future PCP actions. Where do we need this kind of actions? Where can they be most useful? Because then we can adapt our plans to what you need. We need your expertise, we need your experience, and this will allow us hopefully to identify where innovation can bring the greatest added value. Strengthening wildfire preparedness is a shared responsibility. We actually see that after me, Hanna is going to speak, DG ECHO. So we are also in the Commission, we are sharing the responsibility. It is a cross-cutting issue that we should not look at in an isolated way. And we need cooperation across countries. Fires don't respect borders. We need cooperation across sectors. We need cooperation across disciplines. It looks like a simple topic. It is a very complex one, and we need all authorities and member states to work together to get this under control and to be better prepared. We need innovation for that to allow authorities to be prepared, and therefore I am looking forward to all of you participating actively, as I said today, and giving us new ideas and helping us to find new solutions to address this challenge. And I wish you all a productive and very inspiring workshop. Thank you.
It's like an Oscars, I think, basically.
And good morning, everyone. I actually was standing on this stage once, but in a completely different forum as a choir. So it is a bit of a different. Yes, I can sing my speech. Many thanks. First of all, of course, to Corinna and colleagues in DG Home for the invitation. It's not the first time that I'm contrary to Corinna, doing this. CERIS is something, is a unique opportunity also for us to be part of a fascinating journey. So Corinna spoke about innovators, and I will speak a little bit about end users. This is where we complement. because I represent end users, although there are around the tables some even further down on the ground end users of those firefighters, for example, of those actions that we are going to discuss today. So I think it's an excellent opportunity really to do what we are paid to do here, basically to see how we marry the innovation with the practice and how we can indeed stimulate ourselves in thinking where we can get better. So, of course, I'll have to state here that Horizon Europe research program is vital to innovate in civil protection. And as you said, Corinna, sometimes the link may be difficult to imagine why here we deal with disaster risk management, especially on wildfire side. But there is indeed a reason. We are in ECHO, so part of the commission that is dealing with civil protection and humanitarian aid, I think changing a little bit also the paradigm and how we think about what we do in order to really reflect how we better prepare. And in order to better prepare, you need to know how your scale of risks or threats is changing, how you anticipate them, and then how you fit the innovation that is necessary in each and every sector of life to better fit the change. So this is basically the two things that I want to speak today about. One is the wildfire risk and intensity that is indeed very much visible. And the other one is how to marry that with the innovation uptake, where we can bring in better solutions to what we do on a daily basis. So, of course, it's visible, and we also hear as citizens of countries, and we know what happened over the summer last year. We had a wildfire season that was unprecedented, I think, since 2017. We had a burn area of Europe bigger than Cyprus that was burned. And this shows really that the scale of the risk related to wildfires is exponentially growing. We will, as a Commission, actually in 10 days, publish a communication on integrated wildfire management system. Because we believe that tackling the issue of wildfires does not and cannot only be about response. It has to be about management of all the elements that bring in additional risks to wildfires, whether it's ecological, social, cultural, or economic dimensions. We have situations of abandonment of land. We have situations of people moving out. There is a rural development element that is genuinely linked with the growing risk of wildfires. We have data about this. We have foresight. We know that is happening. So we need to really do something about this, not only because of climate or nature or environment, but also because of our citizens. This communication will outline how we can change our actions or better integrate our actions when it comes to land management, better data and research, and of course, early warning, wildfire governance, and last but not least, population preparedness. All these elements need innovators. They need you. We need you to be part of this conversation about how we, in an integrated manner, manage the risks so that we can then, when it comes to wildfires, because we will still have them, let's face it, tackle them better. So, on the uptake of innovative assets and innovation in general, we need both operations, so we need to be looking at the equipment, vehicles, technologies that are necessary to better equip those who are fighting the fires, but also those who are preparing and managing the risks. But also we need to close the gap that is between the operations and preparedness. I think there is still not really especially in the governance of wildfires, this feeling that you take a decision as a decision maker, be it on the local level, be it on regional level, being business. Do you think really, when you take a decision about investments, do you really think that you are tackling disaster risk management, that you are taking a risk-aware decision? And this is where I think the pitch is really complicated. Corinna mentioned a lot of things about the workshop, and I really also hope that you will have a chance, also because there is a nice setting of round tables to exchange in detail of how you can marry the two. But we already have tools that can support the innovation and the uptake on innovation in this particular sector. And one key instrument that we want to promote is pre-commercial procurement, which allows us end users to make to move from the just a pilot phase, right, to the solution that can be used universally. I think it's critical that you hear what the end users need, right? Because otherwise you don't make the link. The gap is not closed, and that's no-brainer. And I don't have to tell you this because you are in this group doing the research and innovation for security for someone. And I don't want only to talk about end users in the sense of firefighters. I want also to talk about population and people, yourselves, your families, that really need this innovation and research to be very pragmatic and hands-on. So this is what I would like you to encourage to do today. It's also about unions, and this is now very big, what I'm going to say. But yes, it is about population preparedness, and it is about safety and security of people. But it is also about European competitiveness and strategic autonomy. So whatever you're doing in your research and innovation that can help to manage disasters, that can be wildfires, but it can be anything, is absolutely supporting the element of competitiveness and strategic autonomy of Europe. I give you one example. Maybe some of you have seen a famous yellow firefighting fleet planes that are manufactured in Canada, that we buy from Canadians because we need them to manage big wildfires. And has anyone asked yourself why we do not produce them in Europe? Why we are always dependent on one country? Friendly country, I have to say, but still one country. Is one of the questions, and I'm not now asking you to think about whether a capacity of plane production in Europe needs to be enlarged for the wildfires, but is a legitimate question. Is a legitimate question. With the scale that we see of wildfires we've seen last year, why not yet? Why this is a problem? And maybe one of you can find, or some of you can find the answers here. On my closing remarks, I think what I want to say is that what I would like at the end effect, and it's a continuous process, right? So we will not end with the end of the current financial framework. We will still continue to really bridge the gap between the end users, innovators, and the end users in that context. But what I really would like to say at the end is about building resilience. of our societies, of our economies, of our population. And this is a very important element of your conversation, should be a very important element of your conversation. Resilience has a lot of different definitions. It can be a lot of different things, and fair enough. Here you will concentrate on wildfires and disaster risk management that is related to this, and I hear that. But you know, there is a lot of other elements. You can use wildfires. Most of the cases are man-made to really disturb the resilience of some societies. So that can be also a very malicious tool to really make us more vulnerable. So with this, I would like to really thank Corinna and colleagues in DG Home and my colleagues in DG Eco for bringing it all, despite the strike, to life. But at least you have sun, so I think it could be worse. You could have a strike and rain in Brussels. Many thanks for the opportunity to speak to you, and really looking forward to the result of these workshops that are going to be happening throughout the day. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning from my side as well. After this very interesting and inspiring keynotes from our directors, it's my great pleasure to move with the agenda. I will be your master of the ceremony for today, and I work in DG Home in the directorate of Corinna, on the unit that has a new name actually as of last week. It's Innovation and Strategic Autonomy. So I think that what Hanna mentioned in terms of strategic autonomy is something that for us is one of the most important aspects of what we do in innovation, to really have to produce EU-made solutions, to be not dependent. So now, moving on a bit with the agenda, and I know that it's very late in the US, in Los Angeles, from the other side of the hemisphere. It's my great pleasure to introduce, having with us, Dr. Lori Moore-Merrell, she was the fire administrator for the US back from 2021 to 2025, and she was appointed by President Biden. And it's a great pleasure to have her with us, even remotely. And Lori, thank you very much for joining at such a late hour. And please, the floor is yours. Looking forward to your very interesting intervention. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gian. I am so honored to be with you. And I say he says very late. It's actually very early in the morning. So 2:30 a.m. where I am. But I'm so honored to be able to spend some time with you all today. And to talk more, I just heard the last presenter about the wildfire scenario, and to talk with you a bit more about wildfire and resilience and the threat and risk that we have before us. I do want to say hello to everyone from DG ECHO and the European Commission. Thank you so much again for the invitation. And greetings out to my friends from Greece, who I know are there, Nikos and George from Kamia. Always a pleasure to be engaged with you all, and I'm grateful again for the connection. So I'm assuming that you all can see my screen. I see it here as well. I just want to go through a few of the things for you this morning. Let me see if I can make that in a different mode here. There we go. That should look better for you all. Very good. So I'm excited to be able to share with you. And the reason I'm not with you, I'd hoped to be with you today. The reason I am not is that I am at a national wildfire meeting here in the US, where we've gathered federal, state, and local leaders across the wildfire space, because we know that the threat even here in our nation is great, and we are not prepared to go forward with the same scope and scale that we have even in the past, because the threat seems to be outpacing everything we do as long as we stay in response mode. And so I'll share more about that in just a moment. But I'll start by saying to you, things that you already know, that we have an ongoing issue with drought, with the vegetation, with the way that the temperatures are increasing, the extreme heat, and the extreme storms, I might add to that, because the extreme storms are what contributed to our most recent disaster. And then, of course, the climate patterns that continue to change around the world, but the climate patterns that are contributing then to the perception and the climate around, the conditions around that are precipitating a lot of the disastrous fires. You know, we will always say that fire is normal. Wildfire is supposed to happen in many lands. It's supposed to happen in our ecology to be able to perpetuate a lot of our vegetation. What it is not supposed to be is a disaster. And so we have to understand the threat that we have before us and how are we going to manage and get ahead rather than always being reactive to the fire that we have today. The other things that we know are that the societal impacts are great. We now know that it's not just vegetative fires in many of our nations, that we have property damage because of where we have placed homes, often right in the path of fire because we need the housing. We need the infrastructure that's been put in place, and yet it's in the path of fire. And so we have extensive property damage. We have threat to lives. That is a growing impact. And then, of course, the air quality impacts that happen as well. We have, and I'll talk to you more about the LA fires in just a moment, but just in the LA fires, while there were only 32 deaths in January of 2025, and I say only, one is too many, obviously, but we had almost 400 deaths from smoke from those fires. And that is always the case. The direct impact, fire impact on deaths is one thing, but the ongoing impact of what happens in the fire, the products of combustion that actually kill, is always far greater. So that air impact is always something to be concerned about. And then, of course, our risk reduction approaches are far too small. We must do better to reduce the risk and actually begin to build resilience, particularly in our communities as well as our landscapes. You know, just less than a year ago, in June of 25, when the World Resilient Recovery Conference, and there may be some of you who were present at this conference, but you talked about enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response. In other words, we have to prioritize readiness as well as we do response, because if we don't, then what response contributes is less than what we need for resilient recovery. Because it's all of that that comes together. It's our preparedness, it is our response capability, and that then turns into how short is our recovery? How resilient are we when we come back from a disastrous wildfire? And so this is front of mind, and it should be front of mind for us as we continue to prepare for the threat that is ahead. This may be something, and you'll see that I've embedded several QR codes for you along through this presentation and throughout. So you can connect with a lot of these resources as we go forward. This particular dashboard, I think, is very effective. This is by Greenpeace, so maybe you've seen it, but they collect and have ongoing hotspots around the world. And part of the reason for that is the carbon footprint that is, coming from the wildfire, and that carbon footprint, the greenhouse gases and the emissions from the wildfires contribute further to climate change, which then continues to set the stage for even more wildfire. And so we're in a very unfortunate cycle. And the numbers that you see on this particular dashboard today are worldwide, and this was taken just a week or so ago. And so we know that we are seeing this hotter, drier climate, and then that is often perpetuating additional conditions for more fire. For us in the U.S., we talk a lot about these three different landscapes. One being wild land, which I know a lot of nations still call this wildland fire. We are now talking about this in terms of what is burning. If it is wildland, that's mostly vegetation. And so we're very deliberate about this. If we don't call it what it is based on what's burning, then our decision makers, they don't realize the difference. The funding goes to the wrong place. The training money for our firefighters go to the wrong place. And so we have to be very deliberate about how we talk about wildfire. What's burning? Is it wildland? Is that true? Is it our vegetation? Because often we need healthy fire. We need beneficial fire on the land, but we don't want it to get outside the borders. We don't want it to move into the interface. So the interface, as you all know, is that space in between the wildland and a community. We need that to be healthy. We need defensible space. We need green space. We need to understand the requirements of what fuel mitigation looks like in the interface that may be very different than mitigation in the wildland. And so as we talk about this, again, it's deliberate conversation. And then, of course, our communities and our neighborhoods. What does conflagration look like? And I'll say to you that we haven't used the word conflagration in over 100 years until we saw Lahaina and Maui. And then we saw, again, the Palisades and the Eaton Fire. So conflagration is now very much a part of our vocabulary again. And it's that structure to structure fire spread that happens when the structures themselves, our assets that we've built for years, become the actual peril, and they become and contribute to the fuel of the fire. And so being deliberate about how we describe wildfire in its context is very, very important. For us, and I'll just talk about the economic impact briefly, because in just 2022, we had NIST look at, between the cost of fires for us, and this is just in the US, our annual cost was somewhere around $424 billion. And this was mostly in the Western states that we're seeing these kinds of numbers. 3 years later, in 2025, the damage for us in the US reached $893 billion, nearly doubling, right? This is what we're seeing in the impact. And when I say to you that these are fast fires that are often outpacing and overwhelming our capability for response, we must look at this differently. And so these numbers coming from the World Economic Forum are very helpful and very sobering for us to understand. And as you all know, it's not just the US. We know that as, again, the World Economic Forum, and this is a new paper, so maybe you've seen this paper just released in January of this year, but it tells us that nations across the world are burning. We have heavy fire in Africa. All of the nations have impact, and we have this threat that's continuing to be perpetuated. So we have to continue our diligence in how we talk about it, how we come together, how we collaborate around solutions. As I've mentioned already, we are in the US, we have homes right in the path of fire. In other words, we have cleared properties, cleared lands that have burned for hundreds of years in a healthy way and put communities there. So 1/3 of our population is now at risk, direct risk. This is not the fire propagation that can happen into communities adjacent to these fire-prone lands. This is just the direct impact. And so where is fire going to be a problem in the future? We know it's in our communities. We know that we are not prepared from an evacuation standpoint because many of the communities that we've built, particularly in these fire-prone lands, are not built with proper egress. Often there's one way in and one way out. And so our community planners are ignoring even the threats that are before them. When we warn them from a fire service perspective, you have to build differently. We have to build in a fire-resistant manner. Oftentimes, these go on deaf ears because they claim cost is an issue. And so we have to understand that we have got to overcome those notions that it is cheaper to build things that are going to burn. So this is a struggle that we have ongoing, is how we communicate that messaging and how we talk about resilience in terms that people will accept and understand and change their behavior. And so this is an ongoing threat for us. Part of what is happening are, in light of all of the variables that I've talked about so far, are fast fires. And we have learned that in a particular paper, University of Colorado talks about how we see the greatest loss from fires that are moving at very high speeds. In other words, perpetuated by extreme storms, windstorms that are carrying embers miles away and igniting new fires. So this ember thrust or ember cast is something that has again become part of our vocabulary, not something we talked about 2, 3, 4 years ago, but we're talking about it now. We're modeling it now. We have numerous models that are looking at what happened in the Palisades and the Eaton fire, the LA fires of 2025, to understand how these embers moved, how fast they moved and ignited, how far, and what were the size of them. Because once you have structural ignition, the very nature of these embers change. We're not talking about vegetative output of firebrands. We're talking about massive embers that are flying 3-4 miles and igniting in other areas and starting new adjacent fires. And so fast fires are the most destructive, and that's what we are dealing with today. One of the things that I will say to you, and of course this goes right with your theme around resilience, is that we have to understand and help homeowners understand that if you choose to build in a fire combustible manner, not to our building codes, not to a science and what we have explained is going to take place, that you choose a cheaper way to build, a non-hardened way to build, that you don't concern yourself with your roof or your siding or your windows and the things that we know are going to burn, then what you've worked for all of your life is now at risk. The housing market for us depends on stability. It depends on our insurance markets. And we see that our insurers are choosing not to insure in many of these cases, rightfully so, because they don't want to take the increased risk. And so for us, and what we try to teach is that resilience is not an ideal. This is a requirement. This is a must-do for us today if we're going to get ahead of this. Now, I'll be very honest with you, as you all, I'm sure, are observing. Our current administration does not carry this. Our current federal administration, presidential administration, does not carry along with these same paradigms. And so I will assure you that there are great numbers of us in the U.S. who are still moving, still pushing for resilience as a requirement and understanding the impact of climate in our nation and around the world. We saw it in no greater display than we did in the 2025 January fires. We have to understand what happened there, and so that we can make sure it never happens again. And yet we are at that same threat even today. Here's a timeline for you so you can understand that it was just 14 days. We had 12 fires, each perpetuating the next because of the ember spread around the LA area. And what happened in those days, of course, the two that you know well by name were the Palisades and the Eaton fire, and by far the largest of all of the fires that happen in LA and the surrounding areas. Now, on those two fires, we'll kind of focus for a moment just on Palisades and Eaton, because they really tell the story of our threat and of what we have to do to continue to prepare and to be resilient. We had over 16,000 structures that were impacted. 200,000 residents were evacuated, 41,000 of them direct exposure to fire. And so these are the numbers that we were looking at across just 2 of the 12 fires that I just showed you. And so the Eaton and the Palisades fire are now noted as the second and third most destructive wildfires across California history. So we continue to talk about these fires purposefully, because these are neighborhoods, some that can rebuild regardless of whether they have insurance, because of the wealth of the community, some that cannot. And so this is very sobering for us to understand. Some communities have resilient capability, some do not. And so we need to understand the equity of how do we change that so that we can understand the equity of rebuilding from these destructive fires. For us, as I've said to you already, this is now turned to a conversation about urban conflagration. These are vegetated, initiated fires that are right on the interface that move quickly to the initial structure. And then once that structure is ignited, the either radiant heat or the ember cast now ignites additional structures. And as we say, we're off to the races. This is now perpetuated by, for these fires, it was 100-mile-an-hour winds. And so what started in a root system of vegetation moved very quickly into the communities. And now we have, over a 2-week period, 12 fires across the LA area. We have a new weather term as well, and I don't know if you all are using anything like this in your nations, but it's called a particularly dangerous situation, or a PDS. You know, we've used for years the red flag warning in the US. Red flag means that conditions are right, that if we have an ignition, it's going to be a bad fire. It's going to be rapidly spreading. Because of what we've seen with climate change, the ongoing drought, all the things that we've mentioned, we now have a new weather level. PDS means that we are beyond red flag. If we have an ignition, it is going to be devastating. So these are extreme, life-threatening weather warnings. So it's far beyond now a red sky. So what happened on the morning that we had the first ignition in the Palisades area was a PDS warning. And this is where we began to see LA County Fire, in particular, CAL FIRE. These are names of fire departments you all are familiar with. They began to hold over their shifts of firefighters. They called in new additional overtime shifts before they even had an ignition. This is when you are really recognizing what is the potential here, what could happen, so that we can again prepare as best we could to get in front of this. As you all know, it wasn't enough. And so PDS for us, and we've already had several PDS warnings this year that have resulted in fires across our nation. And this is, I'll show you, there's no sound on this video, but I'll just show you a little bit of the before and after, and you'll see some of the buildings and how this fire moved rapidly across these neighborhoods and all that was burning at the same time. This is right on the waterfront in Malibu, and you can see the devastation as the fire moved from structure to structure right on the water. The Pacific Palisades areas, completely devastated, the structure-to-structure fire spread that occurred. Now, the wind currents, as well as building materials on some of them, contributed to some of the structures, as you can see, being resilient. So there are a lot of variables. A lot of people like to think that's just the building materials and they were built to WUI code. And sometimes it is, but not always. Sometimes it's the wind current. Sometimes it's because we had firefighters right there fighting fire on that particular structure. So there are many variables that contribute to the resilience. LA fires and this urban conflagration, these were the two biggest fires, the two we talk about the most, the two most devastating, but two very different communities. As I've mentioned just briefly, they were both wind-driven fires. They were both drought conditions, heavy fuel loads. Both had suppression challenges and water challenges and evacuation challenges. Unfortunately, most of the fatalities occurred in the Eaton Canyon fire in a community called Altadena. And a lot of this had to do with timing of the ignition. You see, the Palisades ignited during the day. As I already said to you, we had pre-positioned a lot of resources. They were prepared to respond. They responded. Yes, there were water challenges, but the evacuation and life safety was front of mind anyway. So the firefighters worked feverishly for the evacuation, moving hundreds of thousands of people. And then what happened with the Eaton Canyon fire, this ignition took place in the evening. And so more people were at home rather than being, at work, as was the case during the day. They were at home. And this is an older community. And so there were a lot of elderly folks that lived in the Altadena community, a lot of them disabled. The firefighters were not able to move as quickly there because they were working the fires already at hand. You saw how many other fires they were working. So to move resources now to a new ignition, you might imagine took some time. And so these are the sorts of things. The other thing is that at night, the winds had picked up even greater speeds and we could not fly on the Eaton Canyon fire. And so there were a lot of variables. And this is why the best kind of response in the world, the best we do, and CAL FIRE, LA County, they're the best of the best. And it wasn't enough. We have to do something different. This is another report that came from the UN, and I think it's particularly telling because it sort of reiterates everything that I've said to you on the impact of the fire on community, and understanding what we must is that the physical vulnerability of the buildings contributed to the fire spread. In other words, they became, the very assets became the peril. They became the fuel. The homes became the fuel. And so this is how we have to understand that, they're not building to fire codes. They're not understanding that structure to structure fire spread happens if we put structures too close to each other. And so structural separation for us has become also a part of conversation. But when you own a piece of land, sometimes we build and the structures are large and they build right next to each other. And what we're trying to explain to a lot of builders and a lot of homeowners is if you don't build in a fire resistant manner, you're going to burn again. This is not just a one-time phenomenon and you're done for a while. These fires are going to happen again in the same type of geography. As I said to you, our response was not enough. These are the numbers. And when I think it's important that you understand just how much was deployed. LA County had 9,000 firefighters. We had another 5,000 plus all the air assets, helicopters, how many engines we saw from CAL FIRE, plus federal response, the U.S. Forest Service. All of these assets at every step for the 14-day period were outpaced and often overwhelmed, particularly in the Palisades and the Eaton Fire, the early ones that happened when the wind speeds were so high. So the Santa Ana winds died down some over the 2-week period that allowed them to get in front of it. Night flying, when the winds came down, being able to get ahead at night operations is really critical for us. It's cooler at night. The fires don't spread as quickly. You can get a handle on it. And so nighttime operations has become the norm for us. And that wasn't the case just a few years ago. These are a couple of reports that I want to share with you. The QR codes are there for them. So UL, what you might have known before as UL or Underwriters Laboratory, the research institutes of UL had been selected to do the scientific review on both the Lahaina fire and the LA fire. And so these reports are incredibly important. As you can see, the fire pace, what ignited first, how the fire moved, all of the fuel load, the actual timelines of what happened in these fires, so that we can understand, again, how do we prevent next? What are all of the things that need to happen? The LA fire report, this is just phase 1. So there is a phase 2 coming. So what you see here on the screen with that QR code is phase 1. So stay tuned for phase 2 to really understand the full impact of what burned, what didn't burn, and why. So what have we learned? Well, there's a lot of information that we have out of these fires already. Is that, I think the biggest one is that the structures are obviously part of the fuel load. No fire suppression system in the world is going to be able to stop losses on these large conflagrations. When we see the fast fires, when we see the vulnerable fuel load, response is too late. They can be right there with everything they have, and it's not enough. So resilience by design must happen before ignition. Anything we were going to do to stop what happened in LA, anything we were going to do to stop what happened in Lahaina, and several fires even before that, when we did not really come to terms with these were full-on conflagrations, right? Not wildland fires. So we have to understand that any change has got to happen before ignition. We cannot respond our way out of this scenario. So we have to control what we can prior to the fire ignition. Another thing that we've learned is that we have to help people understand where they live. It is unfortunate that we have some real estate online services. Maybe you've heard of Zillow or Redfin. Those are two that we have in the U.S. where you can go online shopping for homes. We had successfully, in the U.S., the Fire Service had successfully gotten one of them to actually show the fire-prone nature, or if you lived in an embercast zone, or if you lived in an interface. And there was so much pushback from a lot of the builders and the real estate agents and the property owners around saying, oh, you're lowering our property value by just putting out that information, that they actually took it down. So some of these behaviors were like, we don't know what to do anymore, right? Because trying to get people to listen, to understand, how do we protect your assets? How do we protect lives? in helping people know where they live. So we have a lot of frustration in our nation right now. And so we are still working to help people understand and to learn where you live. It is imperative for your own safety and to protect your assets. One of the other things that we do is we talk a lot about Zone 0. And maybe you've heard that. Again, trying to teach people to be responsible, make themselves savable, right? Understand how do you really contribute to your own well-being and protect your own property. So understanding individual responsibility is part of this as well. So mitigating your home. And a lot of this is the behavior change is coming from the insurance agency. So we know that if you have a mortgage and you can't get insurance, that's a problem. And so you're much more likely to change your behavior and mitigate your home, understand how to harden your assets. And so that's really important. So Zone 0 is that 5-foot immediate area around your home that you keep with 0 combustibles, right? No children's toys, no deck or outside furniture. All of those things have to be outside that zone. So we are learning to talk about the various zones around structures to reduce that ignitability. One of the things that I will say to you and what we're facing forward, and part of the conversation and the meeting that I'm in even now, is about technology. As I've said to you, we are outpaced and overwhelmed in our response. So how do we get ahead of it? I think technology is going to have a huge role in that. We have to understand that evolving technologies can really reduce our risk. It can help with fuel mitigation. It can help with detection of spot fires so we get to them more quickly. It can help with the response, whether it is a massive drone swarm for suppression capability, whether it is a camera detection, whether it is our stratospheric observation and our satellites. All of these things matter. So tech is going to have a role going forward. The importance that we continue to innovate and we get data and understand that data, we have to pay attention to the data. We've got to understand climate has already changed. We have to now try to improve our wildfire management and our prevention. And so this is key for us. And then continuing to engage in our communities is absolutely necessary. Helping people understand where they live. And this is not a one and done, teach them one time. This is perpetual. It is as perpetual as our fuels mitigation, right? We have to continue. And it's an ongoing effort to educate those people who live in these fire-prone lands. So all of this is important. It is, we don't have one solution. It is many contributing solutions to our resilience. So I can tell you just as I start to wrap up here for you, we are facing globally evolving risk. I know that the people in that room know that. That's why you're there, to have this conversation. We have threats to communities. We have threats to people. We have threats to our ecology. We have ongoing threats that are cumulative. Every incident, however, leads to an opportunity for innovation, whether it's in our technology, communication, and leadership to prevent the next. And I think that is our ongoing responsibility. I know it's our mission. I know it's what you want to do. And that's why you're having these conversations. We want to work together to prevent next. And it's incredibly important that we all continue to have these conversations and that we all continue to talk together. One of the opportunities to talk about this is so that we never waste what has already happened. And so I say often, never waste a tragedy. We cannot forego talking about what has happened. We have to have the lessons learned, and they can't just go in a report that sits on a shelf. They have to go in a report that's actually used to turn into messaging. It's actually used to try to put policy in place and change the laws around building codes and the acceptance and adoption. So we cannot waste a tragedy. We can't waste the scientific learning that we have from these tragedies. One of the opportunities that I want to tell you about that is coming up later this year is the Wildfire Congress. I was able to start the Wildfire Congress in 2024 in the US. And one of the things that we talked about across the 56 nations that gathered is our ongoing climate change and the impact of wildfire. And so it will continue to be part of the conversation in London as the UK hosts the next Wildfire Congress this year in September. So if you're interested in that, there's the code. You can come as observers. Maybe some of you will come and represent your own nation as this. DG ECHO is always part of this. Hans Daas was at the opening, the inaugural Wildfire Congress with us. He came as a delegate. The UNDRR was there as a delegate. And so we welcome participation as the nations gather. This is not a conference, by the way. This is a gathering of nations, the top fire officials in the nations, to have these hard conversations about how do we have knowledge exchange? How can we do better to uplift the fire community so that we can continue to have an impact? So with that, I want to say thank you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's have this ongoing conversation. We must group together. We must carry on together to carry science forward, to carry the lessons learned forward, and to continue to make a difference as we all work to build toward resilient landscapes, fire-adapted communities, and effective response when we need it. Thank you very much again to all of you for allowing me to spend some time with you this morning. Giannis, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Laurie, for this great presentation. May I ask you to stop presenting so we see you on stage?
Absolutely.
It was very, very insightful, I think, for us. It was great to have you here at such early time in the morning indeed. And now from us, we won't take any questions, but we'll move to a coffee break here in the room. And see you in half an hour after the coffee break to continue with the agenda. Thank you very much once again for joining us.
My pleasure.